Some of us are bothered by the arrival of Donald Trump on the scene over the last decade, especially how he has wormed his way into the church and literally poisoned the gospel of Jesus Christ. Unfortunately, those of us who are bothered by that are a minority of Christians overall, because he remains wildly popular within the church and is seen as a fighter for Christian values. To those of us who are not elevating this man as being God's anointed, we're able to see right through his constant lies and self promotion. And yet, Donald Trump's desire to promote himself would be substantially less effective if he wasn't also surrounded by numerous people who want to do it for him. And those efforts to glorify Donald Trump do happen all the time, but they often get lost in the avalanche of craziness that we have to deal with almost every single day. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Last summer, Congressman Paul Gosar introduced legislation that would put Trump's image on the $500 bill. It made news for a few days, then quickly faded away. But the idea of having Donald Trump's image on legal tender did not die. In February of this year, Congressman Joe Wilson introduced legislation to create a $250 bill with Donald Trump's image on it. The idea for this is connected to the 250th anniversary of America coming up next year. Not to be outdone, a couple weeks ago, Congressman Brandon Gill introduced what was called the Golden Age Act, which would put Trump's image on the $100 bill. A couple of days later, Congresswoman Lauren Boebert enthusiastically endorsed the idea and wanted her name to be added as a co-sponsor. These ideas to glorify Donald J. Trump went largely unnoticed because, once again, there is so much craziness surrounding Donald Trump in every other area. To many of us, the idea that Trump's image would be on the $500 bill or $100 bill or newly created $250 bill is simply insane. However, there's now something even crazier. If you thought that taking steps to put Trump's picture on legal U.S. tender was a step towards worshiping Donald Trump, how about the idea that even criticizing him could have you declared legally insane? Now, you may be thinking that could never happen, but in actuality, the first step toward that happening occurred a few days ago. And I didn't think this was real when I first heard about the story on Friday. But Republican lawmakers in Minnesota have actually introduced a bill that would classify Trump derangement syndrome as a mental illness. Here's a short video of the news from Fox 9 in Minnesota.
Lawmakers in Minnesota want to, here in the state, add Trump derangement syndrome as an official mental illness.
The bill aims to change our state's definition of mental illness to include a form of criticism of the current president. Hannah Flood joins us from the Live Center with the details on this. Is a bill that's getting national attention. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. This bill defines the Trump derangement syndrome as an acute onset of paranoia in otherwise normal persons that is in reaction to the policies and presidencies of Donald J. Trump. Now, this bill lists symptoms as verbal hostility towards President Trump and overt acts of aggression and violence toward supporters. Currently, mental illness is defined as a disorder or other issue that is included in a diagnostic codes list. While it's frequently used by President Donald Trump and his supporters, Trump derangement syndrome is not recognized as a mental diagnosis. The derangement syndrome political phrase was actually coined in 2003 by a political commentator. The Minnesota bill borrows the exact phrasing that commentator used to describe Bush derangement syndrome, describing critics of former President George W. Bush. Now, according to online records, this bill is set to be introduced today and referred to the Health and Human Services Committee. It is unlikely to be approved by the split legislature, but we'll, of course, let you know what happens. Tom McKelly.
The bill itself had 5 different authors who were willing to put their name to such a stunning proposal as this. One of the state senators released this statement on Facebook. I am proud to be one of the co-authors on this bill, which calls attention to the oftentimes outrageous, violent, and unreasonable reactions we've seen towards a president who loves America and wants us to be prosperous, strong, safe, and great again. So this is where we're headed. Any unreasonable or outrageous reaction toward Donald Trump would be legally classified as a mental illness if these state senators had their way. Now, fortunately, this bill will not pass because the state Senate in Minnesota is divided. But the fact that something like this is introduced is mind-blowing. It is a canary in a coal mine, a warning to us of what's developing underneath the surface. So the point I want to make in this video is that all the glory that Donald Trump wants to bring upon himself is having an effect on Republicans all across the country. They want to put his image on our money, name airports after him, carve his face into Mount Rushmore, and classify those who would criticize Trump as being mentally ill. But the truth of the matter is that there really is Trump derangement syndrome, and patient zero is Donald Trump, and his derangement has infected almost half of this country. And make no mistake about it, these people will not be happy until Trump's image is on our money and it is illegal to criticize our dear leader.
No president has ever fought for Christians as hard as I have. And I will keep on fighting, and I'll fight hard until I'm back behind that desk in the Oval Office, the resolute person. Resolute person. Thank you.